Welcome to Key Tech. Please describe this channel if you are interested in today's video. The saying shooting oneself in the foot is true for the Netherlands right now. Since the end of September, the Netherlands has been covertly targeting Nexperia, a Chinese-controlled company, ultimately seizing control. China, facing the Netherlands' aggressive approach, didn't tolerate it. Within a day, it urgently halted the operation. Even Europe has now received news that caught the Netherlands off guard. After U.S. media reported that the Netherlands had taken over the Chinese chip company Nexperia, China immediately took action the same day. The general content of the report is to prevent Nexperia from exporting semiconductor products globally from its Chinese factories. Although Nexperia is headquartered in the Netherlands, the majority of its production capacity is actually in its Chinese factories. It is understood that Chinese factories account for 70% of Nexperia's total production capacity and supply approximately 20% of the world's mature chips. This measure, while already a drastic one, is even more worrying at this critical juncture. Just before China halted the ban, Nexperia, a subsidiary of WinGtech Technology, was also hit by a U.S. ban. With export controls from both China and the U.S. weighing heavily on its shoulders, it's easy to imagine the immense difficulties Nexperia faces in shipping mature chips. Nexperia has recently informed its customers that it is actively communicating with government agencies and will resume supply only after a decision is made. Even so, European automakers remain panicked. Days have passed, and Nexperia has yet to offer a definitive answer, while the Netherlands, the instigator, remains silent. This has forced them to unite and demand an explanation from the Netherlands. On October 16, local time, 16 European automakers stated, "This issue must be resolved swiftly, otherwise the European automotive industry will suffer a significant impact due to the Nexperia chip supply disruption." Isn't that a significant impact? For components like automotive chips, the delivery cycle isn't as long as that of lithography machines, so they won't resort to large-scale stockpiling. Nexperia supplies 20% of the global chip market, and such a widespread supply disruption would inevitably cause a temporary halt in European automakers' operations. A temporary halt might not be a big deal for these European automakers. But with the current uncertainty, they can't help but worry about a prolonged shutdown, resulting in increasing losses. And this uncertainty was caused by the Netherlands. Many find it strange that Nexperia's operations are now stable, and they simply can't understand why the Netherlands would jump in and stage a control operation at this moment. In fact, a simple analysis of the preceding and subsequent events reveals that the Netherlands is acting as a vanguard for the United States. Just before the Dutch incident, the United States had already taken action against thousands of Chinese-funded companies. Not only was the parent company blacklisted, but even acquisitions of more than 50% of the controlling stake would be subject to U.S. long-arm jurisdiction. The Netherlands just happened to have Nexperia in its possession, so they found a pretext to seize it. Now that the U.S. hasn't waived its ban, the Netherlands certainly won't do so easily. Furthermore, Nexperia is a piece of fat meat that's practically within reach, so how could the Netherlands easily restore the status quo? Thus, even with China's swift ban, the Netherlands remained indifferent, still seeking plausible excuses. European automakers, seeing the Netherlands' attitude, couldn't wait any longer and united with several other automakers to speak to the Netherlands, demanding a swift resolution to the issue. At this point, the situation is no longer a matter between the Netherlands and Chinese companies. Europe has been forced into the fray. But they can't turn to China, as China has a legitimate reason to do so, and since the Netherlands was the instigator, it's their responsibility to bring this matter to an end. Thus, Europe remained silent in the face of the verbal pressure from automakers, effectively acknowledging that the Dutch move couldn't destroy the European automotive industry. It was at this point that the Netherlands suddenly realized it needed to make amends. Following the frantic outcry from the automakers, the Netherlands held an internal meeting overnight to discuss whether to partially lift the freeze on Nexperia. While it didn't directly concede control to the Chinese company, the partial lifting of the freeze is a positive sign for Nexperia's current operations. It's unclear whether the Netherlands has truly come to its senses, or if this is just a stalling tactic. In my opinion, the former is unlikely. If it were, they wouldn't have been so unwise as to stir up this drama. It's highly likely that they're trying to appease European automakers and lower China's guard against them, potentially forcing China to relent. After all, this matter has such a wide-ranging impact, and by the time the EU intervenes, the situation will be different. The Netherlands may be calculating this, attempting to minimize its presence in the situation. In simpler terms, it's unwilling to foot the bill for this trip. But in reality, they've already been paying the price. The cries of European automakers and China's calls for a halt are all unavoidable costs. The Netherlands, in fact, has repeatedly failed to repent. Previously, regarding the lithography ban, when the Netherlands, Japan, and the United States negotiated a three-party chip agreement, which was met with strong opposition from China, the Netherlands hoped for EU intervention. In the end, the EU refused to intervene, and even ASML threatened to withdraw from the Netherlands. Ultimately, the Netherlands, unable to please either side, was forced to return to the status quo in disgrace. With this precedent, the Netherlands should, logically, not arbitrarily choose sides. But now, they've resorted to this tactic, even interpreting Western rules to the hilt, practically robbing them. They've fallen into this situation of their own making. Let's hope the Netherlands isn't just trying to stall for time, but is genuinely helping European automakers resolve their issues. Given China's principle of forgiving minor mistakes, as long as the Netherlands corrects its mistakes, China's ban will undoubtedly be lifted. But if they simply continue to probe, China will not budge. This will only cause hardship for the companies themselves. A company's interests shouldn't be constantly manipulated by the US and the West, becoming a symbol of instrumentalization. What are your thoughts on this? Feel free to leave comments, like, and share.